Hi, it gives me great pleasure to be able to introduce Ro to you. Ro is a senior facilitator who comes with a lot of experience. She helps leaders to grow A-class teams. Teams don't always know how to leverage their collective strengths, and that's where Ro has a role to play. She coaches leaders and their teams so that they can make better decisions, work together, and get stuff done. She specializes in organization change and team coaching, helping teams work through rapid and continuous change, often in challenging and uncertain situations and times like current times. Keeping up the pace can be really, really challenging, and leveraging that power of the challenge and times is where Ro comes in. She brings in a powerful way of coaching that sustains change and also teaching teams the skill of teaming and coaching together in a manner that they can fuel higher performance and engagement. Having said that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ro to you. Over to you, Ro.
Hi, thanks very much for that introduction, Paranita. Good to be here. So I'm hopefully going to share my screen, and I've created a little presentation on something called Mentimeter. So it would be absolutely fantastic if people participate in this, because you're able to vote and write comments on this presentation. So to do that, can you see the screen? And just let me know if you can actually see the screen, Paranita.
I can. I hope everybody else can see.
Brilliant. Yeah. So there are two ways of doing it. You can either go to menti.com and enter the code 49411036, or if you want to be clever, you can actually access it by scanning the QR code, maybe using your phone if you want to use it that way. So there are a couple of ways of doing it, entirely up to you, but please do join in. Otherwise it will be a very quiet presentation between me and Paranita. Okay, so let me just see if I can move my little Zoom bar out of the way so I can actually move the slides on. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today is how you can accelerate a coaching culture team by team. So you will see that I have a sense of humor. So on this question here, do you identify as a team coach? If you've managed to get into, I can see a few of you got in there already. If you would like to vote, so you can see there's a dachshund, one of my favorite little dogs. There's a cat, I have a cat, and then there's Danger Mouse, one of my favorite cartoons growing up, particularly the song. I won't sing it to you, but I am tempted to. So, and we're recording this. So I'm not sure how many are on the call, but I've got 8 people voting so far. I'm going to stop the voting in a minute. So you've got a couple more minutes to vote, and then we'll see where we get to. So we've got predominantly team coaches on the call, which is great. So hopefully that means we'll get some really good questions coming in. And I know Paranita is going to be looking at the chat box to see those, to make sure we are able to answer those. And I think I'm going to stop the voting now, just in case we spend too long on this. I do like this slide though, just because it makes me laugh every time I look at it. So yeah, I especially love the cat, the way the cat says no. Cats are always saying no. It's so right. Cats always say no. Well, my cat does anyway. So the majority of people on the call today are team coaches. I can see that there are some of you who aren't sure, and we've got one person who isn't. Hopefully there is something for everybody here. Hopefully you'll go away from the session today with a few thoughts and hopefully some challenges to your thinking in terms of why teams are important, particularly in complex organizations. Okay, so we're getting ahead of ourselves here, people. This is great. Excellent. Well done, team. I see a good team already. So what do you think is a core role of a team coach? So we've got quite a few things up on the board there. If you want to put your thoughts there, then that obviously gives us a bit of an opportunity to pull some of the comments out.
Yeah, the people saying to create team bonding, to help develop hidden potential, enable teams to work through common challenges, hold a space where the team can identify and work on improvements using effective questions and interventions, to support awareness, bringing the team member to the expected level or standard. That's an interesting point.
It is a very interesting point, because of course, when we're talking about coaching teams, we're not just coaching the team, we're coaching stakeholders who have a vested interest in the success of the team. So I think and we're also talking about complexity in the broader sense. So obviously, whose standards are we talking about? We've obviously got the organization standards, we've got the team standards, individual standards. So I think that's a really, that would be a great question to ask a team, actually. What do you think are the expected standards of performance for this team? That would be a great question. Yeah. And I like that one about holding space as well, because it's about making sure that we allow the team to grow and develop. So we don't want to be putting stuff into the team all the time. The team needs the space to actually grow and do stuff itself. So I really, really like that one. And obviously listening and empowering is part of our coaching skill set. So we should be doing that. No matter what kind of coaching we do, we should always be doing that. I think if I was learning coaching,
new coach,
sorry, sorry, I missed that.
A coach who's trying to understand the difference between regular coaching, team coaching, how does one help them understand that difference?
So I'll probably come on to that in a minute, because I think that's a really good question, because there is a difference, and you're absolutely spot on. Yeah, there is a difference. Yeah, fantastic. So I'm going to move us on then, and we'll pick that question up in a minute. I just want to explore, first of all, so why do we do team coaching? And I think maybe bring that question in here, actually. So when we're doing individual coaching, we're coaching the individual around something either to do with their performance, confidence, whatever it might be. We're coaching that individual. That individual, however, when they go back to their job, when they go back to whatever it is that they're doing, they are then entering back into that system. So no matter what we do in the one-on-one sessions, they are all, the system is always going to exert more power over the individual than the individual can exert on the system. So, you know, to all best intents, we have a great coaching session. And then when the individual goes back to their desk, they find that the usual pressures are on them from the system. And it's not their fault. They are working within a system. And I think anybody who coaches, you know the importance of supervision. And part of the reason we have supervision is to understand that systemic impact on what we're doing as coaches. So team coaching, on the other hand, is where we're hoping to get a bit more into that system perspective. So I really like this diagram because it sort of illustrates the point. It's based on a fable of blind people describing an elephant, I think it was, to an emperor. And obviously each of them has a different perspective on the elephant. So, you know, the person who's holding the tail thinks they're looking at a rope. And then the person who's at the trunk end thinks it's a snake, and so on. So all of those perspectives give you an interesting view. If you took them individually, it would actually, you would have no idea that you were looking at an elephant. And so when we're coaching the team, we're trying to find that elephant, the system, what's actually happening in the system that is affecting that individual's performance. And you can do that to a certain extent with individual coaching, but it does mean that you've got to go out and talk to those stakeholders, or the individual has got to go out and talk to the stakeholders. And also you might want to do some coaching around what might the system be, how might the system be impacting them individually. You can do it, but if you're talking about improving performance in an organization, if you want to change the culture, then actually working with the team is probably a good starting place. And clearly you will be coaching individuals as well. So the individual and the team coaching working together is a really good combination. Obviously that depends on budget, so you might not always have the luxury of being able to do both. So great question there. Okay, so let's just have a bit of a deeper dive into coaching, and I'm sure the people on the call, we've got some really good deep level of coaching skills on the call, so hopefully none of this will be a surprise for you. But I do know that I invited a couple of my clients onto the call, so they might not have the same deep level view of coaching that we do. So coaching is a form of process consultation where the coach's main task is to help the clients understand their way of generating problems, not to solve them. So as coaches, we're not in there solving, we're not consulting, we're not giving advice. We are there to give a process consultancy approach to the conversation. So what do we actually mean by process consultation? So for those of you who've heard of the phrase, you might know that it was actually Edgar Schein who captured this concept of process consultancy. So instead of the consultant going in as the expert, they are going in as the helper. And the idea is that you sit alongside the client in that sort of stance of helping, and you co-create, you co-develop through a process of extended discovery to help the client understand what's actually going on so that they can come up with their own solutions. So I really like this definition of coaching because it brings in that very nice sort of co-creation piece, which for me is at the heart of coaching, whether it's individual coaching, team, group, whatever it is, it's that co-creation and helping piece. So I don't know, have we got any comments, any questions from the audience, Paranita, on this?
Not as yet.
Okay, fantastic. Interrupt me as we're going along if we get any questions coming in. The other thing to be aware of when you're coaching, particularly when you're coaching teams, anything can happen. So you have to have the ability to stay present in the moment, because if you go in there with a fixed agenda and you think you know what's going to happen, then you're likely to fall flat, because you never know what the team is coming to the session with. You never know what's going to happen in the session. So hence today, you know, Paranita and I agreed that as questions were coming in, I would take them on the fly as well. And this is one of my favorite quotes from my mentor, David Clutterbuck. If you know where the conversation is going, it's not team coaching. And I think that's, if you keep that in the back of your mind, individual coaching as well, if you keep that in the back of your mind, if you start to see that there's a path that the conversation is going down and you're steering that conversation, that suggests that you've veered into one of the other disciplines, be it consultancy, be it facilitation if you're coaching a process, if you're forcing a process on the team, be it training if you're overly telling people what the answers are. So that keeping that in the back of your mind is really important. So why is that relevant to a coaching culture? And I want to bring in some experiences of what's been happening in the past few years with, first of all, the pace of change in technology. We know that that has been pushing organizations very rapidly down a certain path. And then, of course, COVID came in. And we know as individuals and as human beings, we like that certainty. So what we see in organizations at the moment is that they become, I wouldn't say obsessed, but overly focused on having a process and having a linear process that they can follow. And we know that given the rate of change and given what's happening in the world, life isn't always certain. In fact, it's usually pretty uncertain. And so if you go in there with an answer and thinking you know where the conversation is going, you're not really going to be embracing and developing a coaching culture. So organizations that are going on this path of creating that coaching culture have to be very clear about what this might mean for them if they are overly fixated on a linear path to success. So what might it mean for our processes? What might it mean for our system? So keeping this in the back of your mind, do we actually know where things are going? Have we already come up with the answer? That probably means that we haven't done enough of that discovery work first before we can actually come up with some solutions. And it may well be that you have to pivot your strategy because of things that are happening in the environment. And so obviously a coaching culture then enables that, because if you've got this in the back of your mind, then you're going to be able to pivot much easier. That's not to say, of course, you don't need processes and systems. Of course you do. It's about taking that adaptive approach to the processes that you have. And with my ex-business improvement hat on, taking that continuous improvement approach as well. Processes are not once and done. They are living entities in themselves. So you need to be awake and open to that. Okay, so.
That's an interesting point where you mentioned they're living entities. And, you know, It's almost as though you can read my mind. I was going to say, if they're living entities, is there a method that we follow, a step-by-step process? And I think your next slide is all about that, probably.
Yeah, so basically in team coaching, teams are there to work together, make decisions and get stuff done. That's what they're there to do at the end of the day. If they're not doing that, then it probably tells you that something maybe isn't right. So that's useful data. If they're not getting things done, they're not able to make decisions, they're not working well together, then that tells you that you maybe need to do a bit of discovery work to find out what's happening. So the questions that we ask ourselves when we're going in to do that discovery work are things like, how effective are they at doing, how effective are they at working together? How effective are they at making decisions? What decisions do they make? How quickly does it take them to make decisions? What kind of research do they do before they make decisions? And what do they actually do? So some teams are very good at analysing data and looking at problems, and then they never actually get things done because they're spending so long actually in the analysis phase. Whereas other teams go off and do stuff, but it's all sort of chaotic and ad hoc. Because they haven't spent that time up front doing that discovery piece. So when we're going into client and finding out what's it like in this system, they're the questions that we really need to address to understand how effective are they at doing things. And then obviously we're trying to understand as well what gets in the way of them being their best selves. So all teams, unless they're really dysfunctional, all teams have some good things about them. They do some things well, they do some things not so well. So what we're trying to do is help the team understand how they can increase the times that they do things well, and maybe understand what gets in the way of them not doing some of the other things. So that understanding of barriers and obstacles is really important. And then this is the third point, but I guess it should really be the first point, is about, do they have a clear purpose? What does this team exist to do? Why are they here? And often what you find in organizations is that teams have been brought together, but actually they're not a team, they're a group. They're just grouped together under a particular leader in the organization, but really there's no real purpose for them being together. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then, what are the relationships like in the team? How do people get along here? What are people afraid to talk about things? What doesn't get discussed in the team? What gets discussed outside of the team? Are there different agendas in the team? It's fascinating when we go in and do any kind. I'm doing some discovery work at the moment, not on team coaching, on another piece of work. It's just fascinating. You get such a rich picture of the organization from the discovery process. And people find out things from that discovery process that maybe they weren't even aware of. So although you're not coaching in that way, you kind of are, because you're asking questions and people are thinking about things and they're getting insight. So it's always a very interesting part of the process because they discover things about themselves as well. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, you need to think about the internal and external stakeholders. So who does the team impact? Who does the team touch? Are they aware of who their different stakeholders are? What do the stakeholders think about the team? So that's really important to know, because that also then helps you understand, and the team understand, more importantly, what are the things that they need to work on? Do they need to work on those things? Do they need to maybe think about how they're coming across to the stakeholders if they want to be working on something different? So all of those things are really, really important for the team to understand. And then the final point there, just to wrap up this slide, is how do they apply the learning? So again, often because we're in such a fast-paced world, we do stuff and then we move on to the next thing without actually taking a pause to think about, okay, what went well? What maybe didn't go so well? What did we learn? What could we use next time that is going to help us? So that learning process is really, really important. So whilst I'm talking about team coaching here, we always parallel process, don't we? This is kind of the organization and system process as well. This is why organizations exist as well. So you're kind of parallel processing at the same time. If we want to create a coaching culture, these are the kind of things that we need to really address in that first discovery piece. What's the purpose? Why are we creating that coaching culture? If it's just that we think it's a good idea and everybody likes coaching, then that's not probably going to be a really good enough reason. You need to understand, how will coaching make a difference to the way that we deliver our services, our products to our customer? How will it make a difference to our stakeholders? So that, for example, could be the community in which the organization exists. So that these questions are really good at both a team level and then that macro organization level as well, in terms of what's the purpose of coaching for the organization. And obviously when you're coaching, and I brought this point out at the beginning, you know, if you're coaching the team, then you're already starting to coach the system. Whereas if you're coaching the individual, you're kind of 2 or 3 steps removed. Whereas a team, if you think about how many connections does one person in the team have and where are those overlaps, and once you start to map that out, you can see how that then is touching on different areas of the organization. Any questions, Parinita, before I move on?
No, in fact, I was going to open it to the audience saying, is there something you want to ask at this point before we move ahead? Because today they seem to be very, very quiet. Anyone has?
We do have a question. Let me just share it with you. How do coaching cultures, how can we put coaching cultures into a group discussion where the trainees never speak up for anything on particular topics or sessions?
So how, say that again, how can we?
I think they're trying to ask, how can you implement coaching culture into a group discussion where the trainees never speak up for anything on particular topics or sessions?
Yeah, that's, so this is where, how do you involve people who maybe are less inclined to speak? And there are lots of different tools, but perhaps one of my favorite tools is based on brain science, really. And it's where you actually ask people to spend a few minutes reflective writing or drawing, doesn't matter what they do, but just some time reflecting and noting down their thoughts, either in a visual form or written form. And, you know, obviously depending on how long you've got, 5 minutes is at least the least amount of time you want to give people. And then you invite everybody to go around individually to share their points. Nobody else speaks while the individuals are sharing their points. And then when everybody's had an opportunity to share their individual points, then you can have a conversation about it. And hopefully what that does is, first of all, it gets people to think, because you want, usually if people are less inclined to talk, it's because they want to think about stuff. The second thing is it gives everybody a permission to speak, and you've got a structure for people to do that speaking. And then hopefully that then encourages the debate, because everybody's had equal airtime in terms of talking about their point, and then it's an opportunity for everybody to share. So
although there's an opportunity, but if a team member doesn't grab that opportunity and doesn't show up as vulnerable or willing to, you know, share his or her thought process, then what can the coach do to get them to be more participative and feel? I think it's more about feeling safe, because in my opinion, one would only hold back, not being vulnerable, when I'm not sure, should I say something, should I not say something, will I be judged?
So yes and no. I mean, obviously you don't know what's going on in the person's mind, and so obviously in that example I'm using a facilitation process, and hopefully then, because you've created that process, that structure, people will at least share on that particular topic. If what you're talking about is generally in sessions people are showing up and they're not speaking, then that might be an opportunity to offer an observation. And then you could also do things around psychological safety. You could do a little questionnaire to get some data. You could say, what is anybody else noticing? So, because what we want to avoid is being the hub of the conversation. We want the team to actually spot what's going on for themselves. So, so yes, I would always put it back to the team. What are you noticing about the level of participation in the team at the moment? And then that enables people to share their perspectives. And it could be that the team is newly formed. It could be that there are some issues in the team, whole host of things. What I've often found is that just by asking an opening question, and you as a coach help create that safe space. So you have to demonstrate yourself that you're vulnerable and you're willing to be vulnerable. And once you've done that, the team usually steps up and they usually do then contribute. I've yet to work with a team when, after going through that process and creating the space, nobody is willing to put a thought into the room. And usually because by then you've had that conversation. And when we're coaching teams, we're in that complex space. We don't know what's going to happen in the team. So it could be that you ask, what are you noticing about participation, and nobody says anything. And then you've got then a choice about what do you do with that. And it might be that, well, that's interesting that nobody said anything. So is that data in itself? What's actually happening here? And so, yeah, you have to go with the information that you're getting in the room at the time. But it's that, as you can tell, that's a really great question. And yeah, we could talk for a long time about that for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get to, and I've covered this already, I think, in some of the things, but just let's summarize it here. So what makes a real team is that they have that real connection around shared purpose and goal. They know why they're here. They know what they're here to do. They also have shared responsibilities. So that means that if I, as a team member, am struggling with something, then you as my colleague will say, look, Ro, do you need some help with this? How can I help you? It's about everybody taking that joint responsibility for achieving an end result, rather than saying, oh, well, I've done my bit and that's all that matters. Because if you've got that shared responsibility and you're all working towards the same goal, if I fail in delivering something, that affects everybody. So having that shared responsibility and being caring and concerned about your colleagues so they can achieve what they're meant to do, then that is what makes a real team. And obviously in all of that, it's that interdependence. If you're all working on the same thing, then that's pretty clear that you're a team. If you're working on different things where I don't need, Paranita, I don't need to talk to you at all, we don't have anything in common, I can carry on doing my stuff regardless of what you're doing. It doesn't really matter, and I can produce an outcome. That probably isn't a team because we haven't got that interdependence.
Joe, there's another question that's come up. Would you say that the team coaching essentials need individual coaching for each member too? I think what they are trying to ask is, along with team coaching, does individual coaching need to be packaged in or tied up?
I think so. It depends on the type of team, first of all. It always depends. So again, when we're coaching, there are no definitive rules around what is and isn't right, because of course you're working in a complex system. So it does depend. If you've got a team leader, then I would always say that working with a team leader one-on-one is important, because of course they are part of the team and you want to make sure that they feel safe working with you, and they feel safe in the team as well, because they are probably going to have to be vulnerable within the team. So you want to be sure that you are supporting them in a way that's going to be helpful for them and for the team. So as a minimum, you probably would want to be doing some one-on-one work with the team leader. If there is budget and the team wants to do it, then that one-on-one coaching at an individual level is really great. There are a couple of things you need to be aware of there in terms of making sure that the boundaries between the team and the individual stuff are really clear. And if again, budget allows, I would say co-coach, and also if you can have somebody doing the individual coaching different from doing the team coaching would be the absolute ideal. Obviously recognizing not all organizations can afford that much budget. So if they can't, you just need to be really clear about the boundaries, and definitely you will need to have supervision, because anything that crops up around the ethics, confidentiality, whatever it might be, you'll need to be able to take that outside to supervision to help you as the coach and the coach, well, hopefully co-coaches, work through those things so that you make sure that you're keeping that psychological safety within the team. Again, great question. And different coaches have different approaches. That would be my approach. You might find other coaches have different ways of working. Ultimately, though, the client, it depends on the budget as well. It does depend on the budget.
Now, one thing's coming to my mind, Ro. In individual coaching, we start with what the client thinks is a clear purpose, but somewhere along the way, the purpose could change or the desired outcome could change. Does that happen in team coaching too? We go in saying, this is what needs to be done, but there's something below in the iceberg that shows up.
Yeah.
How does it go then?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, it's like you're in a complex system. So and we have a saying, don't we, in coaching, the presenting problem is never the real problem. So part of that, and hence why I love that process consultancy approach to coaching, because it's a lengthened discovery process. So as you get deeper and deeper and you start to peel back the layer of the onion, you actually get to the core of what is it that's really stopping this team from doing whatever it is they want to do, you know, whether it's performing, you know, fantastic performance, whether it's really getting stuff done, whether it's making decisions, whatever it is, you get to the core of the onion through that continual process of discovery and growth and learning. So I would say the outcome can change, but obviously you need to make sure that you recontract with stakeholders, with the team as you're going along, and hence why, you know, depending on how long the assignment is, you need, and same with individual coaching, you do that check-in, don't you? You know, based on where we start to where are you now, what, you know, the start of this, you wanted to get these outcomes, is that still appropriate based on the conversations we're having, or have things changed? And that's obviously a very simplistic view of how you would do it, but that's essentially what you're doing, isn't it? So it's constant checking back and forth. Is this helping you? Is it adding value? Is this where you want to go to? What's changed? And particularly in organizations, you know, I worked with one team where during the course of the team work, the manager who recruited me in to do it, so the client, he resigned. So I then had to recontract with the acting team leader, who was only in an acting capacity. So you, and people obviously shift and change in teams as well. So you're always going to be contracting, as David Clutterbuck says, and it's true, you're always testing and, you know, are we on track? What's happened? Team members come and go. Is it okay? How do the team want to deal with this? So yeah, great question.
There's a follow-up question that says, how can a coach get embedded within the team environment? I think they're wanting to know that, you know, the coach comes from outside, right? Coaches could be, in most cases, it's an external individual, especially in the framework we are discussing. How does the coach then become part of that team so that the process moves seamlessly?
So I think that's a really interesting assumption, that the team coach should be part of the team. So I'll give you my view. This is my view. Obviously, there are different views out there. I don't think that the coach should ever become part of the team. You are not part of the team. You are there to help the team. That said, you will always be dipping in and out of the system. So, you know, you will become part of the team, because you're getting to know people. They will start to relate to you. You will feel like you're part of the team. However, you always need to keep that helping hat on. Am I helping the team? Is my role here helping the team, or have I become too embedded in their system so I can't now be objective about what's happening in the process? So again, when you're doing one-on-one coaching, if you find yourself too interested in the content, it probably means you're not coaching. And the same is true with team coaching. If you're getting too invested in the content of what the team is doing, then you've actually moved into that consultancy space. So I would say you need to have rapport, you need to have a relationship with the team, and the team needs to trust you. But you should never be part of the team, because you're going to be leaving at the end of it. And what you don't want to do is the team to become reliant on you. You want them to be self-reliant. So that, I think that's my view. There may be other views out there, but that's definitely my view. Okay.
Is it a good time to take a follow-up question, or we hold on to that?
Hold on to that one for the time being, because I just want to get onto a bit more of the content, just to make sure that we've got a few takeaways in terms of the actual, you know, what can people have that they can potentially use. So, and it is relevant actually to what we've just talked about. So being clear about what you stand for as a team coach is really important, because when you're helping an organization, they need to know in what way you're going to be working with them, how will you help them. And so for me, I have a number of things that I keep in the back of my mind. So first of all, my directive is that you leave the team capable of coaching itself. That's always my prime directive. The team needs to be able to coach itself when I move on. And then I have a sort of 8 principles that I try to embed in coaching that I do. So the first is that we're always focused on business challenges first. So we're not in there to do life coaching, we're in there to do business coaching. So we need real life challenges so that they can then take action on stuff. Because if you remember what we said at the beginning, it's to work together well, make decisions and get stuff done. So focusing on business challenges first is really important. Also, be clear up front that solutions may not be apparent in one session. They may not be apparent in 2 sessions. It's that, remember, we're giving them a process of discovery, growth and learning. So we want them to be comfortable with the fact that they might have to sit with that discomfort for a while of not knowing and figuring it out. And we know in the world of work, that's quite tricky because people always want answers today. And do you know what? In complex systems, answers aren't always possible today. We also need to create that framework for collaboration, and that will look different in each engagement because it does depend on the client. If you've got a set of tools that you can rely on, then you can flex those tools according to the client that you're working with, and always leave the team in a better place, whatever that looks like and feels like for the team. So the team judges that, not you. Remembering that we're working in complexity. So again, this is about you as a coach being comfortable with things going wrong, and also teaching the team that it's okay if things don't go according to plan, and celebrating those successes. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and they do actually have sort of a rude word for it, but stuff ups on a Sunday of the week. They do what their stuff ups for the week. And I think that's a really fun way of doing it because it makes people realize that, you know, we are human, we will make mistakes. It's a guarantee that. Also remembering that we want the team to take action, and we also want them to have that moment of reflection, because you learn by reflecting. So doing and reflecting, and then implementing any changes. Obviously, if we want to leave the team capable of coaching itself, then we need to leave them with teaming skills and coaching skills. So that's hopefully the training part of what we're doing in the coaching as well. And we are always coaching the team as they show up. So the point that you made earlier about how people show up, maybe being quiet and what have you, that's what we're working with. That's the energy we're working with, and that's what we have to coach in the room. So again, it's trying to be curious and not make too many assumptions about what's going on in the team. So they're my team coaching principles and prime directive. I'm happy to take the follow-up question now and any other questions.
I think you partly answered it, because the question is that, just a minute, I'll just bring it up. Based on the description of real teams, which we had earlier, in top corporate teams where each member is responsible for a different role, they may have shared responsibilities, but they may not really collaborate with each other. So then how does it work to get them to really support each other and move forward?
Yeah,
as a collaborative function and having a joint responsibility.
Yeah, so I think this is interesting, because the higher up the organization you get, the harder it is to identify the real team, because of course you've got responsibility for different business units. So you might be the general manager of a business unit, your colleague on the exec team might be the general manager of a different business unit. So at business unit levels, you're probably not going to be collaborating. However, as execs, you have a joint responsibility for the success of the business. And if you've got shareholders, then you're delivering to your shareholders, but you're certainly delivering to stakeholders. So the interdependency, the task that you're doing is actually more about how do we deliver value to our clients and stakeholders. And so how do we work together as a team to do that? Given that we've got our own P&L to deliver, what is it we're going to be collaborating on? And sometimes at that level, teams find that hard, because obviously you are then in that complexity zone, because you're looking at systems. So you're looking at reward systems, you're looking at management systems, you're looking at processes, and also you're looking at leadership styles as well. So that at that level, it's very, very complex, because you've got all of those different things competing. So it's about helping them understand that, and then helping them work out, okay, so what is it we're collaborating on together? So that's probably the focus that I would be encouraging people to look at there, to identify, well, do you want to operate as a real team as well? Because the team must want to work together as a real team, otherwise it's not going to help them having team coaching.
Right,
yeah.
thank you.
Very good question, that really, really interesting question. Yeah. Okay. So is this helpful, by the way, from your point of view, Parinita? Is this sort of, are you getting any sort of moments of realization, and is it challenging your thinking?
Yes, it is, because, I recall a situation where I was working with this team, and while they were collaborating, I also picked up on cues of competition within each other. The enterprise leaders wanted to outsmart the other, saying, I'm better than you in this process. And yeah, I'm supporting you because it's required. However, wanting to show that I'm different, I probably bring in something more to the unit. So yes, what you're saying is true.
Yeah.
But I've also noticed that, if we have a process, like you mentioned, the process takes care of everything. We have to just have faith in the process. That's been my experience. There will be norming, storming, everything. But you just sit back, see how the team is doing, kind of be an invisible facilitator, a bee on the wall kinds, and then suddenly come in when you feel the need, step in then. Otherwise, let them go through it, because only when they go through that chaos will some clarity emerge.
Absolutely agree with that. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's sometimes just your presence in the room changes the dynamic, and it gives permission for them to have the conversation. Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Spot on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk now about 3 interconnected paths for a team-based coaching culture. And there are going to be some more questions in a minute, so you've got an opportunity to come back into Mentimeter. So I'm going to be talking, some of these we touched on already: decision-making, psychological safety, and what I call creative conflict. So let's have a look first of all at decision-making. So how might the team coach help teams make decisions? So we've got a couple of things on there already. So share your thoughts in the chat, in the Mentimeter box. How might the team coach help team decision-making? What are your thoughts on that? 2 people so far.
Yep. We'd love to see how this particular group and team is empowering each other to learn in this space.
Exactly.
I'd love to see that.
Exactly.
There's another point that says empowering them.
Yeah. So the person who put empowering them, maybe can you just give a bit more meat on the bones? Put another comment in there about what might that empowering look like, sound like? What might there be their experiences?
Yeah, we'd love to hear a little more from the person who's put that point.
Nice. Yes, nice. Yeah.
By encouraging their thoughts without being judged.
Yeah. I like that one about noticing patterns to their current decision process. I think that's a really, because that's about reflection and learning. So that's a really nice one. Not giving solutions, definitely. Yeah. And obviously there are lots of tools that you can use to help the team with decision making. I really like the suggestions here though, because these are all relying on questions and reflections, which then puts the the onus on the team rather than the coach. And when we're coaching the team, it's always about the team coming up with the solutions rather than the coach. And obviously, if you're putting a process in there all the time for them, that denies them the opportunity to come up with their own process. Yeah.
Expand the thinking of team members to look for alternates and help the discussion for them to select the best option for the business goals.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. Fantastic, thank you very much. So we'll, by the way.
May I just step in very briefly? Because you're in a flow, I didn't want to interrupt you. Just to let you know, we have another 10-12 minutes. So if there's anything very important, please move in that direction.
Thank you. So obviously, because people have accessed the Mentimeter presentation, you'll be able to get a copy of the slides afterwards. And anybody who's watching it afterwards, I think you can download a copy of the slides from the link as well. So let's move on then to conflict in the team. What are all the possible sources of team conflict in your experience of working with teams? What have you seen? Again, this is another opportunity for you to share on the Mentimeter. I'm going to move on in a minute if nobody's going to share anything on the interest of time. Okay, you've gone quiet on me. You've decided your brain's too tired, so we're going to move on. So from sort of my research and experience of working with teams and individuals, sources of team conflict come from many areas, and I sort of combine transactional analysis with some of the key areas. So the first one is process. Is there a fair process that's going on here? Do I feel hard done by? The second one is task. Is what I'm doing of value, or am I doing stuff that really doesn't really matter? And therefore, I don't feel that I'm adding any value, and so I don't feel value myself. The other one is status. So, I don't feel that I'm important in this team. I don't feel that anybody really takes any notice of me. So what's my position in the team? And then the final one is relationships. I don't feel comfortable in this team for whatever reason. So it's that I'm okay, you're okay kind of thing from transactional analysis. And all of those things obviously ultimately rely on having that psychological safety there. And psychological safety is the ability to speak up and acknowledge when things aren't going well. It's also that ability to acknowledge when mistakes have been made as well. So it's not about being nice and friendly to everybody. It's about having those robust conversations that sometimes teams need to have, and knowing that the team will still be in a good place once you've had those robust conversations. And again, all of these things apply equally to the organization. If you're creating this in the teams, then hopefully that will extrapolate out to the organization itself. Hence, then you're creating that coaching culture in the organization itself. So again, if you are still with me and your brain's not too tired, what I've given you my definition of psychological safety. What does psychological safety mean to you? Haha, safe space to open up, nice. Give it a couple more seconds for anybody else who wants to share. You've all gone shy. I've tired you out. Your brains are too tired. Okay, well, I'm going to move on. So again, what I've done here is I've given you a little sort of aide-memoir around psychological safety. This is based on 3 questions that Amy Edmondson asks in her TED talk, which is brilliant talk, definitely recommend it. And what I've done is I've just pulled them together and created a little tool that you can use. So if you think about that, creating a climate of openness, which is what coaching culture should be about, then obviously you've got a thinking frame, which means that you think about problems as a learning opportunity or a learning problem rather than an execution problem. So that's really, really important, that you're seeing everything as a point of learning rather than just cracking on and doing stuff. And we weren't able to do it. So that was a problem. The beginner's mindset frame is that curiosity, which as coaches, we should be encouraging anyway. And the final one is that awareness frame. This is about acknowledging that we're all human and there is absolutely no chance on this earth that you're going to get things right 100% of the time. If that were the case, we would not be human, because part of our ability to learn is based on the fact that we make mistakes. That is part of our programming and how we learn, by making mistakes. So we need that in order to be the brilliant human beings that we are. So that's about celebrating that and recognizing that that's what makes us different. It's what makes us awesome. And then I just wanted to include here a little bit of a case study, which I do talk about in a lot more detail in my book. And this is one organization that I really, really admire for many reasons. They provide healthcare for people in the Netherlands, and there is also organizations globally now. In fact, there's one in Perth, I found out, so I'm very excited about that. And they are very well known for their self-organizing teams. And for me, a coaching culture, when it's really humming and singing, you will see potentially self-organizing teams, because they naturally are able to coach each other. And how they did this is they purposely set out to have self-organizing teams so that they could have little sort of entrepreneurial units within different neighborhoods within the Netherlands. And those different entrepreneurial units would then serve that community. And the reason for that was that they wanted to create that connection with the community and with the people that they actually supported to have that independent living. And the way they did that was fantastic. They got a really, really neat little system. So they, if you like, operationalized self-organizing teams, which is why I love it so much. So if you're looking for hints and tips on how you can actually do it in a way that does create that self-organizing team spirit, then definitely would look at Buurtzorg as an organization. They've got some really simple protocols around how teams manage and coach themselves, really clearly defined roles. So it's absolutely crystal clear who does what and why. They've also got ownership of their own destiny. So not if a new team sparks up, they are responsible for creating their own client base. So they're responsible for networking in that neighborhood to try and find their own clients. And it's typically a team of 12 nurses, typically. They're not necessarily always nurses, but typically that's what they look to have. And that nursing team carries out all of the roles that are needed to provide that service. So there might be a housekeeping role, there might be an admin role, there might be a finance role, whatever it is. They, within that team of 12, have all of those roles so that they can actually create that little business unit in that neighborhood. And the reason why, I think, going back to the very first thing that we talked about, that purpose, the reason why I think it works so well is because they've aligned their coaching culture very clearly to their organizational mission, which is about empowered patients and empowered teams. So they're parallel mapping what they're looking to provide for their patients, clients, however you want to describe them, in the way that they actually provide that service. And I think that's a really neat way of aligning their corporate strategy with how they actually deliver their service. And obviously a really dear subject to my heart as well, because it's about caring for people in the community, which just makes it even better. So that's a really fantastic case study. Okay, so I just want to very, very quickly ask the final question, and I can see I've got a couple of people who've answered already. How will you know, if we go back to that prime directive, leaving the team capable of coaching itself so that you can create that coaching culture, how will you know when the team is ready to coach itself? Just give me your thoughts on the little bar chart there. So we've got the team, they'll have a team learning plan. The coach will not be seen as the go-between. They're able to co-create a safe environment. They'll be co-coaching in pairs. They have a simple session framework in place. The coach not seen as a fixer, and expectations are clear. And I think I've set it so you can answer more than one of those. I think I set it as that, I'm not sure. And obviously you might choose more than one of those. So those are questions that I've just put in place to get you to think about how you will know when the team is ready to coach itself. So these are the kind of things that I'm looking for when I'm coaching a team. You might be looking for other things, but this is my pick and mix list just to give you a start of a 10. Okay, so thank you for the votes coming thick and fast. Thank you very much for that. You'll have access to the Prezzo at the end of the session. Ooh, that's interesting. Why did it not do that? Go back. There we go. Fantastic. So leaving the team capable of coaching itself, you need to make sure that you've got an agreed time when you're going to transition out. So you obviously a number of sessions, a number of months, you're not going to be there forever and a day. So answering that question about embedding in the team, you don't want the team to be reliable that you become part of the furniture. They need to have a simple session framework. How are they going to coach themselves on a regular basis? And that doesn't need to be anything too hefty, just something very simple. Obviously, how they're going to work together. So some sort of agreements and framework in terms of how they'll work together. And perhaps the most important thing, a team learning plan. So how are they going to continue learning as a team and growing, which they can then have a quick review of at each session and it gets updated. And if you then follow that sort of simple approach, it means that you've then got a way of systemizing coaching culture in the organization, which will then hope create that coaching culture that everybody wants to achieve. So thank you very much. I've written quite a few books, some of them with my co-writer Gillian, who is also doing a session at this conference. Please go onto Amazon and buy a copy and review it on Amazon. It's very important to get the reviews on Amazon, or otherwise they don't put you up the list. So I'd be grateful for anybody putting any recommendations and comments about the books on there. Thank you very much. And then finally, if you would like to connect with me, I'm always up for connection. There are my contact details. And hopefully, we've been on a journey of discovery and exploration with some learning along the way. And hopefully, you've got some means and ways of actually creating a coaching culture, team by team, in your organization. Thank you very much indeed.